All right, we have started recording. Hi, everyone. Welcome to SAC Interactive. My name is Nolan. I do this monthly tech meetup called SAC Interactive. It is always the third Wednesday of the month here on my Zoom channel. It used to be in person at an outfit in downtown Sacramento, but because of COVID, we have lost our in-person home for the time being. If you have ideas on where we can relocate for the future, I would love to chat with you about that. SAC Interactive is always free, always open to everyone. And we talk about something to do with web or mobile development each month. The actual technology and thing we discuss changes from month to month, but it's always something to do with web or mobile building stuff. We are always looking for new speakers. If you'd like to present on a topic in the future, please reach out to me. We're also always looking for topic ideas. If you have a suggestion for something you would like to see someone else present on, please reach out to me. You can just shoot me a DM with your email address and other info while we're here in the Zoom if you'd like. And you can get more info about the group at sacinteractive.com. And with that, we have Mr. Mark Takata from Adobe here today to talk to you about all kinds of new features that have been added to the recent version of Adobe ColdFusion. Mark, the floor is yours. Take it away, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nolan. Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Takata, and I am the Adobe ColdFusion Technical Evangelist. There's only one of me. Unfortunately, I wish we had more of me to spread around, but there's only one of me. And so today what I'm going to be talking about is new features in Adobe ColdFusion 2023, but also I'm going to be talking about new features in 2021, and I'll tell you why. The reason why is that a lot of people were on 2018 and did not actually move to 2021 for a variety of reasons, one of them being a really big change to the architecture. And very recently, like a few weeks, maybe a couple months ago, 2018 went out of support. So it's no longer under even extended support. So everyone has to move out of it. And a lot of people are asking, well, do I go to 2021 or do I go to 2023 right away? And it's a valid question, actually. And so I'm going to cover some of the changes that happened between the two. We actually have not had an update, like a real update to 2023 yet. And that for some people is actually like the thing that they worry about. So I'm going to start though with like what is ColdFusion, right? Because some of you might not know. I know John knows for sure. Nolan has an inkling of what it is. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about Adobe WhatFusion. So Adobe ColdFusion, in a very basic sense, it's an abstraction on top of Oracle Java. It's a way of programming in a faster, easier way in multiple form factors that ends up getting compiled to Java. So it has all of Java's security, stability, scalability, all of that fun stuff, but you don't necessarily have to code in Java to get the benefits of Java. That said, because we're very flexible, you can actually code in a bunch of different form factors. The original form factor in ColdFusion was just like tags, which look like HTML tags, but they do a variety of things. They're a little black boxy. It's how I started, and it's kind of the oldest way of doing ColdFusion. It's also kind of known as a legacy way of doing things, not to say that it doesn't exist in a wide variety of code sets today. But if you're coming into ColdFusion and you're greenfielding stuff, or you're a new developer, the likelihood is that you're going to do coding in what's called CF script, which looks a lot like JavaScript. Hence why a lot of people move over to it. It's very familiar. It's very human readable. It just kind of makes sense. If I were to show you what a tag-based page looked like, and you were from like literally any other programming language, you'd be like, what is that? Because it does look a little bit weird. It reminds me a little bit of like original, this is like a deep cut, but like original Angular, maybe a little bit. Like if you squint your eyes and it's a little dark in the room. But anyway, moving along. So why is Adobe ColdFusion a thing? Well, it was originally designed to be a rapid application development platform. It's super, super fast to code in. And by the way, rapid application development is not just like a magic term or something that Mark just like pulled out of his butt. It's actually an agile methodology. Like if you do agile project management, one of the slots that you can slot yourself into is actually called RAD. And there's a variety actually of RAD methodologies inside of Agile. And ColdFusion works like a treat. Generally speaking, RAD is about being iterative as many times as possible before shipping to production. That's like the whole spiel right there. The more times you can get in front of your customer, the more feedback you get, the better your code could be. That's kind of the idea behind it. It's also very good at connecting to data sources. In fact, that was one of the very first reasons that ColdFusion became a thing, was they wanted to be able to take database information and plop it on the web. One of the most popular and, in my opinion, best tags ever is CF Query, which has been around like literally from the start. If you ever want to try it, there's a free dev version. You can install that like literally anywhere. It has most of the features of CF. You can use it for free forever. You can't run production workloads on it, but you can like learn how to code on it and do all that kind of stuff. CF is cloud agnostic. Like we are now literally on every major cloud. So GCP, we're on AWS, we're on Azure. You can also run it on bare metal. You can run it on your local machine. I actually tried to run it on a Steam Deck and I couldn't get it to run, but I'm still trying. Like in VMs too. It's super easy to learn. Oh, and containers. Duh. Yeah, you can run it in containers. I have a whole talk on containers as well, running ColdFusion in that. Something that a lot of people don't necessarily know, they think, oh, ColdFusion, yeah, I remember that like 20 years ago. It's dead, right? Wow, no. Its death has been over-reported, let's just put it that way. Actually, we had our best year last year ever. Even, for inflation, like we are killing it. A quarter of this year was actually our best quarter ever. So CF is growing. People are becoming interested in it because it's simple, because it's fast, because it takes less developers to do the same workload, or you could do more workload with the same amount of developers. So anyway, that's CF. Something that all editions come with, and I'll talk a little bit about this because some of the features that we added are related to this. There's something called a PMT, the Performance Monitoring Tool. Basically, it's an observability platform that lets you see, oh, this and this function are taking too long to run, or this query is like super slow. Oh, why is that happening? Oh, because I'm a bad programmer. That's me. And if you get the enterprise version, there's a standard and an enterprise version. That one also includes an API manager, which if you've ever shopped for an API manager, those things are insanely expensive. I saw one that was $4,000 a month. If you not, $4,000 a month. So you get that for free. It's actually pretty solid. It takes a little bit of work to get going and understand. But anyway, so with all that said, what is new in, I'm going to start with 2021 in architecture. So in 2021, we made a really big difference to how ColdFusion was built, how it was provisioned, how it was, pushed up to the server. And that was making it modular. So prior to this, 2018, 2016, yada, yada, ColdFusion basically was one big monolithic thing. It was 2.5 something gigs. It was really big. It was not very portable. It was hard to like provision up. Like if you had a CI/CD, it was kind of hard to like throw it up there. Putting it into containers was kind of a bear. Like just didn't really work. It was just kind of too heavy. Too much was in it. But the thing was, like most of the things that were in it, you wouldn't necessarily use all of them. I mean, you do some of them, of course, but like you're probably not going to use the MongoDB driver, the Oracle driver, and the SQL Server driver, right? Like that's pretty unlikely that you're going to use all of that in one thing. So what we did in 2021 was we broke it all apart and we built a package manager that allows you to just add the packages that you need. There's a GUI version of it. There's also a CLI version. Unfortunately, the CLI version is more powerful than the GUI, although to be fair, most development, I think these days, like you guys are all comfortable with CLIs, probably more so than GUIs. And what you can do with it is you can, for example, you can scan your code and say, okay, in this code, which of the packages are necessary? And it will tell you which packages to add or remove or whatever. Unfortunately, there's no automated tree shaking yet. It's on the map, hopefully. At some point, we're going to add that. So that was new in 2021. Because of that, we were able to add a new lightweight installer. So we went from 5 something gigabytes to, in 2021, 147 megs. Big, insanely huge drop. Now, of course, that's like the bare bones thing that barely does anything. You need to add a few packages when you push that up to your server so you can do the things you need to do. But still, the total size on server is way smaller. The memory footprint is smaller. It's way more efficient. In 2023, that grew a little bit. Hopefully, it doesn't grow too much more to like 170 megs. Still pretty tiny. Also, in 2023, we updated the PMT, and we updated it with some updates for tracking things in Google Cloud Platform. Google Cloud Platform, you're going to see it all over the 2023 editions. It was a really big thing. It kind of completed our cloud story. We were already in AWS, we were already in Azure, and now we're all in on Google, which for me, I used to be an Azure person before I joined Adobe. Adobe threw me kicking and screaming into the AWS world, so I learned that. Never really fell in love necessarily with it. It's a little bit, I don't know, wild. It's like Wild Westy. Like you kind of have to know what you're doing or you get in trouble. Google is pretty easy for me anyway. Like I like it. It's very friendly. It does what you need it to do. It's fairly cheap. I haven't really run into like too many limits. Like, there's only so many ways to run a container load. You would think AWS has 17 though, so I don't know how that works. Over on Google, I just did a talk on this. It's actually on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Adobe ColdFusion. I just did a talk on how to put stuff in containers into GCP, and there were, count them, 3 of those. And then also in 2023, we added some admin API updates. So this is something I haven't mentioned yet about ColdFusion that makes it different than a lot of other platforms, and that is that we include this really powerful tool. It's a GUI tool called the administrator. And in the administrator, you can do all kinds of really cool stuff. You can set up data sources automatically. You can set up authentication objects against a wide range of things, including like cloud features. And I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about what was added in cloud in 2021. You can change your Java settings. You can change the number of templates. I mean, it's like it goes on and on. There's so many powerful features in it. I don't know that I've really seen that anywhere outside of the CFML world. It reminds me a little bit, although this is, in my opinion, way better, like the IIS dashboard, right? Where you can like control IIS. You can kind of do that, except you're doing it for your coding platform, which is pretty darn cool. So that is architecture. Cloud updates. Okay. So in 2021, we added a bunch of cloud features to ColdFusion in something that was called multi-cloud platform. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Essentially, the idea was that theoretically, you would have things like storage, databases, maybe PubSub, and you'd have those across different clouds. And what if you wanted to switch from one cloud to another? Like you would have to refactor all your code, right? Well, we thought, well, what if we could abstract that and say, there's only so many things you can do in storage. You can read, you can write, you can get metadata, you can delete, right? You can move, you can create a folder, maybe. So we said, okay, why don't we make it so that we will abstract that away and you can do all of those things. But if you needed to move from AWS to like Azure Blob, for example, all you had to do was point it at the new thing, give it authentication, and you really wouldn't have to change your code. Neat, right? Pretty cool. Cool idea and concept. I'm not sure that necessarily it's been as successful for a number of reasons. The biggest one of which is usually if a company is all in on a cloud, they're all in on the cloud. Like they're not just running ColdFusion on the cloud, they're running their entire architecture on the cloud. They have huge bills from them. They don't want bills from Azure and AWS. That usually doesn't happen. And so moving from one cloud to another, unless there's been some catastrophic thing where you've lost trust in the cloud or the pricing is significantly different, kind of doesn't happen a lot. The other thing that happened that wasn't as successful as we had hoped was the clouds began to like wildly differentiate themselves. Like the things that you could do in one became so different from what you could do on the other ones that just didn't make sense. The abstractions began to just be so abstracted and there were like switches and things like that that you had to change, that you were like, well, it would literally be easier just to like code it specific for that. So that said, we still have multi-cloud for some of the more basic things, and these are things that you use all the time. Like storage is still pretty much the same wherever you go, like the basic storage. I'm not talking about like the semi-cold, the semi at rest, the at rest. This is like S3. This is buckets, right? They all work kind of the same way. And so those all still work in that same way. So in 2021, we added the AWS and Azure versions of those things. We also added support for SQS and SNS and Azure Service Bus messaging, which is, I guess, a little bit difficult for some people to understand. I'm going to try to give you a little bit of understanding about it. So it's messaging, but it's not like, I want to say ICQ because I'm old, but it's not like Slack, or it's not like texting necessarily. It's inter-application messaging. So it's an asynchronous process. You have something that sends the message out. You have something else that subscribes to that message endpoint, basically. And so the use case I always point out is if you were building a ticketing system, let's say Nolan's band is playing at some huge facility, and they're expecting 100,000 people to hit their website in the first couple minutes, right? Because Nolan's awesome at music. So that's going to take your website out. It is, right? Like you can't scale unless you have infinite money. It's really hard to scale that. And this actually used to happen to Blizzard, who kind of does have infinite money. They'd try to sell tickets to BlizzCon, and it would wipe their servers out, and they would try to scale them up, and it would wipe those out. So what this does is it allows you to take those inbound requests, and instead of trying to write to a database right away, which will just die, or overload your server, or even do like load balancing across servers, it takes those and it puts them in queues, and it knows what order they came in. And then it's got a subscription that reads through those queues, and you can actually spread that load out. And so now you're spreading out the load and still processing things in order across a wide variety of servers, maybe. And maybe you spun these up as Lambdas or whatever as needed. And then you process them all, and then everything spins back down. And now you've handled insanely huge loads without having to create some sort of nasty, insanely high expensive architecture. So that's one workload that I've seen used for this. So now we support that in 2021. We added that for AWS and Azure. We also added DynamoDB. And if you love DynamoDB, that's great. I'm not a fan, but I know a lot of people who are. It's super fast. And if you know how to use it and you use it right, you can like run games off of it. Like it's just so performant. I don't like it. I don't feel like it's user friendly necessarily for me. Again, it kind of goes to my discomfort in general of AWS. Now in 23, we added Firestore, which is Google's sort of version of a document database. And I'm in love with that. So, whatever. I'm not supposed to have bias, but here I am. We also added storage. We also added PubSub, which is their version of messaging. So that's their version of SQS, SNS, and Service Bus. And of course, we added, as I mentioned, storage, which is the way that you put files up. And it all works pretty easily. Storage is multi-cloud. Firestore is not. I want to say PubSub is also not, because of the way that they implemented it, which is a little bit different than the way that it was implemented on the other clouds. So in any case, another big addition for cloud was, actually, this should have been, I don't know why this is in cloud. Actually, I don't know. Neither of these are in cloud. Central Configuration Server was also added. So what CCS is, this should have been in architecture. CCS allows you to manage all of your servers from a central location. And this is kind of a new concept for us. It's very early in its life. We're still taking in feedback from people. Like we basically had a lot of feedback from people telling us like it was hard to set up a whole bunch of servers. It was kind of scary. Like if you make a change to a server and then try to like apply it to other servers, if something goes wrong, you're just kind of hosed. You have to like kill that server, bring it back up, and that takes a lot of time. So Central Configuration Server lets you do all of that from one place, and it lets you back out of changes also, which is quite powerful, quite neat. A really neat feature that it has. We're still trying to get feedback from people. One of the best pieces of feedback we've gotten so far is to allow CCS to spin up a new version, like to just say, hey, make ColdFusion, 2024 come up and point it to this, this code set, for example, right? There's a few Ortus products that do that already, but those are like CLI and not, they don't ship with CF. So this would be something that shipped with CF and kind of worked along with the rest of the way that CCS works. Not sure when that's going to come in, but that's kind of top of the list for improvements for CCS. And then another really big thing, which is also not cloud, which I need to move out of this slide, is there's a new PDF engine that was added. So if you know CF, like CF and PDF are sort of tied together, right? A lot of people use ColdFusion to do reporting, and they report often in PDF format. Of course, Adobe PDF, right? They're like chocolate and peanut butter, right? They're good together. So in the past, we used an engine that was a WebKit engine. At the time when we added it, it was awesome and worked great. It kind of got long in the tooth. Might have let it go a little bit too long, but in 2023, we added a new PDF engine, which is hyper modern. It supports like a bunch of pretty much every kind of image that you could think of that you want to put in there. SVGs, WebP, I think is supported. You can embed video, you can embed audio. It's just super awesome. It's fast. It's pixel perfect. Like it does. You can code in modern CSS, so you can do like grid view, you can do flex, and it all looks good and it all works. So a little bit took us a while, but we finally got it in there. And that right there is potentially like one of the biggest reasons that you would want to move to 23 versus 21, especially if you're doing workloads that include PDF generation for reporting. Okay, so Authentication Services. In 2021, we added a feature to the administrator that allowed you to create a SAML SSO object for your applications to use for single sign-on. And prior to this, you basically had to do that yourself. I'll give you an example. In UC Davis, they actually had a whole team that worked inside of their like auth team that just maintained their ColdFusion, like their custom code for running SSO through their SAML with the various CF apps that they had. In 21, we added that right in, and there was much rejoicing. It got rid of having to do any of that stuff. It just works out of the box. It's very easy. And so, yeah, there's not really much to say about it other than it works. Now in 23, we added two things. I'm going to cover the second one first. So JSON Web Tokens, not sure if you are familiar with JSON Web Tokens. I'm actually not super familiar with them. I haven't used them very much. It's a way for like pages to communicate together securely, but we added native support for that inside of CF. I think it's to prevent cross-site scripting, or it can help with that. But anyway, there's more information online if you want to read up on that. The other really big addition, though, which was asked for from multiple very large clients, was the ability to add SAML and LDAP support for accessing your administrator. Now, why is that important? Well, if you can imagine these giant corporations or government entities, they have lots of password lists occasionally, right? You've got people that need to log into a variety of things, and maybe they have SSO for all of them or some of them, but often it's not everything. If you need to onboard people, that means you need to add them to all these lists. Now, that's a pain and kind of sucks, but the real important thing is offboarding somebody if something's gone horribly wrong and you need to have someone out of your system. That becomes actually a very critical thing. Being able to get them to not have access to critical portions of your architecture very quickly is super important. Prior to now, you would have to actually go into CF specifically and remove their access, right? There really wasn't another way to do that. In addition, unfortunately, a lot of people actually used like one username password for their ColdFusion servers. And so, yeah, bad times. Like, don't do that. But even if you didn't, it was still kind of a pain. So here, you can actually use your existing SSO. If you've got SAML, or even if you have LDAP, you can use that to assign access to a variety of places inside of the administrator to either an individual or even a group of people. And then the moment that those groups or those individuals are removed from those other places, they're removed from being able to authenticate into the ColdFusion server. It saves people a lot of time and can potentially even, save your company or your government institution embarrassment or, more work because the person can't come in and, for example, like wipe out all your data sources or do something else as a bad actor, right? You don't want to think people will do that, but, here we are. Okay. This is a big one. This is a big list. And I'm going to try to get through this because there's a lot here. So 2021 was the year of the language editions. We had a lot of them. You might ask, why? Why in the world would you add all of these things in one year? And honestly, I don't have a great answer for you other than at this point in ColdFusion's life, ColdFusion was being very much driven by an engineering first mindset, right? The engineers had a lot of control about what went in, and even our product manager was a former engineer, was very tech centric, tech heavy. And this year, they just got a lot of their wish list items put in there, right? And it's awesome because they added a lot of really awesome features to 21. So I'm going to go through them. And if you have questions about them, let me know, or probably more likely let Nolan know. Nolan's more the language expert probably than I am. I'm just out here looking pretty. So not that you're not pretty, Nolan. Love you. All right, so let's start at the top here. In
We'll discuss that later, Mark.
Parallelization was added to some array struct and query functions. So for example, array sum, query map, struct filter. What the heck does that mean? It basically allows you, if you're running one of these functions, to say you can actually you can run them in parallel, which lets you use like more threads. And that can, depending on your architecture, run them faster. It's for efficiency. We added new encryption methods, bcrypt and scrypt, and then hashing. Obviously, security encryption for whatever passwords. All that is a stronger kind of encryption. And my favorite of all time addition in 21 was adding the return type attribute to both the CF query tag and query execute. And I don't have a lot of like code samples, but I have one for this because I like it. So what does that really mean? Well, so let me kind of show you here. So this is a page that's going out, and this is CF script, by the way. And at the top, I'm creating a SQL statement, and then I'm putting some params together. I actually have 3 different sets of params. Each of these has a different return type. So the first return type is query. That one doesn't actually need that. The default return type is always query, but I just kind of wanted it to show you that it had that. The second one has JSON array, which basically returns back clean JSON for you, which is super useful. Usually you have to take the query object, which is, I think, a struct of structs or something like that, and do a serialization on it, JSON serialization on it, to get JSON back. I don't know necessarily if this actually saves any CPU processing time. I think when you actually set this return type to JSON array, like it just does that behind the scenes, but I don't know. It's less code. It's a little bit cleaner. I like it. And then the last one, it's a return type of array. And this is an array of structs, which what I'm going to do down here is when I output that, I'm actually going to go through and just iterate through that array of structs. So what in the world is that look like? Hold on. So that's what it looks like. So up at the top here, this is a query object. That was that first return type. It's the default type for ColdFusion. You can see there's a result set. This is your data. And is this too small, Nolan? I'm just realizing.
Um,
Is that better?
I think it's fine. I thought it was fine the first time too, but
You have good eyes.
anywhere in there, all of them look good.
Okay. So that's the first one, query object. This second one here, this is the JSON array. So if you are returning JSON for some reason and need to then put that into like an endpoint that's getting bound on the front end to some front end technology, you don't have to do all sorts of futzing with it. You can just return it literally as this, and boom, you're off to the races. Now you might be asking, why is it JSON array? Like, why isn't it just JSON? So, little secret, there's actually a undocumented version of this called JSON struct, which returns back all of the data that's in the query object along with just the data. Okay, that's not documented anywhere. I don't know why, but it's in there. And then this is return type array. And so as you see, it's an array of structs. I don't know how much more useful that is for you versus just the query object, but it allows you to go through, and if you're going to iterate in some sort of, if you're just going to like want to iterate in it with a loop, which I do here, it'll do that for you. So there you go. All right. Code. Yay. Okay. Moving along. We added new operators. So we added the rest and the spread operator. Dot, dot, dot. And we added immediately invoked function expressions, which some of you may be familiar with. I think JavaScript has these. In fact, I think a lot of different languages have that. Case-sensitive structs. Prior to now, that didn't really exist. Now you can actually force structs to be case-sensitive, which in some cases that was like actually a problem occasionally with using structs. You can now use CFCs and UDFs as an iterator. So that's cool.
Do you have a code sample of that one, Mark?
Which one?
The iterator support?
I have the help X.
Okay.
I don't have a running code set. Do you want me to bring up the help X one, or
no? I can look at that later. I just thought you might. That one is new to me. I wasn't sure what that was referring to.
That's cool. Yeah. It's basically, so like, yeah, you can, if you want to use, instead of like, if you need to go get a data set and you want to do it through a CFC, instead of iterating through it inside the CFC, you can literally point it to the CFC and it will expose itself as an iterator. That's all that is. So, which is kind of neat. It lets you separate your concerns a little bit more than I think otherwise. Yeah, it's which like when I say that out loud, I'm like, that just seems like an obvious thing, but it didn't exist before 21. Then raw Java support. As I mentioned before, you can code directly in CF with Java, which is cool. Why, Mark? Well, it helps integrate ColdFusion into shops that use Java. That's a really big deal. Like VetMed at UC Davis, they are a Spring Boot and CF shop. When this was added, suddenly their Java guys could come over into CF and be able to, help out, be able to understand things, maybe add some things into like proof of concepts in Java directly if they didn't know how to do it in CF. They could like learn how to do something in CF by doing it in Java and having someone show them how to do that. Like it's kind of, I don't know that anybody ever wants to like just code in. Why would you code in Java on top of CF? That seems, I don't know, like painting a car that has a wrap on it already. Anyway, but it is in there and it lets you do neat things. Now, prior to now, you could instantiate Java objects and stuff. Like you totally could. It was in there. This just lets you like drop raw Java in.
The use case I run into with it
Yeah.
is there are certain third-party outfits that have SDK support for Java. And when you try to do the Java cast stuff to turn the Java object into a thing you can use in ColdFusion, the more complex the Java object, the less luck I have actually getting ColdFusion to play nicely with that without doing obscene amounts of hacking at the code to like kind of look like the thing the Java library expected to run. Whereas this way I can just copy and paste the code sample from the Java SDK into my .cfm file and it should just do what it's supposed to do.
Mhm.
It'll save me some hassle that way.
That's a really good point. Raymond Camden was doing something with that with the Adobe PDF, like the Adobe IO stuff, and he was making extensive use of this feature in getting that stuff to run. And without it, I don't know that he would have been able to like get over that initial hump of getting some of the stuff in there. Like today, I was literally watching him add feature after feature after feature after feature, just like using this tech to integrate with all their SDKs, like boom, 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 which is something that's going to be coming out here pretty soon. And he's going to be doing a talk on it at Summit, which everyone should go to. Okay, reduced write. So we added reduced write methods to arrays, strings, and lists. It's a reduce that starts from the right and goes to the left. That's all that is. Dynamic switch case, which I actually didn't realize was not a thing until it came out in 2021. I guess I had never thought to do it. And then I said, oh, wait, that didn't work before, but apparently no, it didn't. So that's pretty cool. Strict equality operator. So as you may or may not know, ColdFusion is I'm going to call it a soft type. You can also call it duck type. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right? So it kind of casts stuff as it thinks is correct, and often it's correct, but also sometimes it's not. So that can be a problem generally, but especially if you're doing equality, like does this thing equal this thing? Well, the way that CF casts, 2 and 2 in quotes are equal if you do 2 equal signs. And that's a weird example, but it totally is something that could happen. And so with this actually forces it to say, this is numeric, this is a string. Are these two things the same? No, they're not the same. One is a string of 2, and one is actually the number 2. So that's, and you can kind of look in a variety of places for examples for that, but it was a pretty powerful operator improvement to CF at this time. Strings as collections was added in 21, so you can iterate across a string, which is kind of neat, kind of fun. I've done it. I don't know that I've ever necessarily found like a real use for it necessarily, outside of just like going through and like outputting pieces of strings. I don't know, like, but anyways, that was added. And then probably one of the biggest additions in terms of like useful stuff other than the strict equality operator, the new array method. So push, pop, shift, unshift. These should be familiar to you, especially if you do JS. Like, they've been around for a while. They were added in 21. And yeah, people make huge use of these. They're very, very usable and awesome. 23, tiny list. So tiny, but not really tiny, as we'll see in a second. I'm going to cover the second edition first, Avro and Protobuf. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Avro and Protobuf. They're serialization architectures. They're used in GCP, which is why we added them. I believe they're used in the pub sub stuff. And so we needed to have support for them anyway. We needed to be able to serialize and deserialize Avro and Protobuf. And so we figured, well, we're adding it anyway. Let's expose it as a language edition. I literally had never heard of these before this, but some people are like, oh, that's like super useful and cool. So you may or may not like it. The big addition was GraphQL. Now, GraphQL is kind of an up-and-coming technology. It's probably one of the first times in ColdFusion's history when we've kind of gotten ahead of a tech before it really landed. And the last time we tried that actually blew up in our face. So, hey, here's up that this is not going to blow up in our face, because I'm the reason that this is in here and I'm going to get blamed for it. So let's hope for the best. So what is GraphQL? GraphQL is a query language for APIs. Essentially, it was created by Facebook to improve their performance and lower their bills, to be quite honest. I'm going to talk about it next week, next is it next Friday? Yeah, I think maybe next Friday at the Hawaii ColdFusion meetup run by our good friend John Barrett, who is here. Hi, John. And we were going to originally add the ability to both expose your data as GraphQL and have a GraphQL client. We weren't able to do that. We ran out of time. We ran out of personnel. And we could have done is just dropped it in and called it a day, but that was not enough for me anyway. Like, you could do that now. Like, you could sit there and drop the jar in for Apollo and run your own, thing and set up your own schemas. And it's a pain and it's a bear and it's just too much work, in my opinion, to do. I wanted to ColdFusionize it, which is definitely a word. And we weren't able to do that in 23, but we were able to allow you to use native GraphQL documents to do queries against endpoints that are exposed. So that's a pretty powerful feature. I use it all the time. And I will go, I don't want to kind of get too deep into what GraphQL actually does here because I have a whole talk on it. You can definitely just Google GraphQL. They have a whole foundation. They have a whole page on what it is, how it does. But we basically support all of the consumption portions of it. So fragments, subscriptions, all that is supported. We are adding the server capability. I'm hoping in 24. It might be 25. It's a lot of work because it's right now to set one of these things up. You kind of have to know a lot about a lot of things. And I want to abstract that away and make it super easy. I want to do a lot of auto detection. We're considering doing things like if you have a bunch of RESTful endpoints, we use those as the schema template at the beginning and then allow you from there to add more verbs. We'll see how that goes. I've seen a couple of places that do some of that already. But if you want to play with GraphQL, there's a really cool tech called BaseQL, BaseQL, that allows you to expose Airtables and Google Sheets as GraphQL endpoints. Super easy, super fast. I've built a ton of apps off of it. The sheets are read-only, Airtables read and write, and it's all automatic. Like, you point it at the thing, it writes all of the schema for you and exposes it and sets up security for you. Bam. It's amazing. So with that, questions? Anyone? I know I've gone like basically a full hour. So hopefully,
kind of a small one. You mentioned a second ago, just you said the new thing you were hoping to add for GraphQL might be in version 24 or 25. This is a little bit off topic, but is that to mean ColdFusion is going to an annual release pattern instead of the every 2-year pattern that it's been so far?
Thank you, Nolan. Yes. And I'm glad you mentioned that because that is a really, really, really big deal. So in the past, essentially, for as long as ColdFusion has been around, there have been multi-year gaps between versions. That's no longer the case. Starting next year, ColdFusion will be on a yearly cycle. Every single year, a new version will come out, which means we can iterate faster. We can add more features more quickly for everyone. There's a lot of changes coming in the next few years, essentially to make ColdFusion easier to use, to allow more people to use it, to reduce the cost structure for small businesses, without negatively affecting how big corporations and enterprise have to use CF because they have a really complex way that they have to use CF. But unfortunately, a lot of that is exposed for smaller folks. So all of those things are coming. And okay. Yeah. So thank you, Nolan, for pointing that out because that is new for next year. So I see a few questions in the chat. My good friend Lois who I'm going to be running with tomorrow in like 107-degree heat, asks, does ColdFusion support RDBMS? Absolutely. It does. It supports basically every data source you could think of out there. SQL Server, MariaDB, like, I mean, yeah, like everything. Like there's probably a driver for it if it exists. And also it's very easy to connect to, like RoachDB, for example, or Couch. All of those. Like there's ways to hit those with APIs. It's very easy to hit those. Um, Lewis also says the last slide mentioned MySQL. Yeah. So we do, and we actually, there's like different drivers for different things. I will point out though, one of the things that happened somewhat recently is MySQL and MariaDB changed the way that their licensing works when you want to actually include a driver inside of your product. And we were forced to remove the driver from CF. Like we couldn't ship with it anymore. And it's a little bit of a bear. Like when you're installing it for the first time, you actually have to go to MySQL. You have to go and find the jar, drop the jar inside of the lib folder, restart ColdFusion, and it will bring it up and allow you to use it as a data source at that point. We've been trying to figure out some way around it, but the legal ramifications were just a little bit too much at the time to be able to handle it. And of course, everyone still wants to use Maria and MySQL. So John says, oh yeah, on the 25th at 12 p.m. Hawaiian time is when the Hawaii ColdFusion user group is. So join me and John there. John says, is connecting to the cloud, such as Google Cloud, basically working with Docker containers? No, but yes. I mean, that's one way of dealing with the cloud. There's all kinds of ways to connect to the cloud, though. So depending on the thing that you're doing, there's different ways of doing it. And I know that's not much of an answer, but there's so many things in the cloud that you can work with that there's not necessarily like one answer. Like, for example, if it's exposed via API, you'd use something like CFHTTP. If it was a GraphQL endpoint, you use the GraphQL capabilities of 23. If it was a Docker workload that had ColdFusion in it, well, then you would use Docker and push it up to the repository or however it handles, pulling it into a container workload, either into Kubernetes or Cloud Run or Fargate or whatever. If it's a database up there that we support directly, you'd create that object in the ColdFusion administrator or inside of your code, and then you'd use that to do reads, writes, you do CRUD against it. If it's something else, you need to either find a driver for it, or if there's some kind of API, then you could, again, use something like CFHTTP to hit it. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. You mentioned a client using Spring Boot with ColdFusion. How does Spring Boot Angular Stack Dev get started with ColdFusion? It's a very specific question. I know why you're asking it, because you're a Spring Boot dev. The best way, honestly, Lewis, is to go and grab the 30-day trial from adobe.com. Just Google ColdFusion download. Grab that, download it, install it locally, and play with it, because it's very, very easy to start. There's a lot of great places on the web to get information about it. There's something called Learn CF in a Week. It's created by the community to help people get started from zero to becoming, a pretty good dev. There's a book offered for free from Ortus Solutions. They're a third-party partner of Adobe that creates a bunch of different tooling for ColdFusion, which is wonderful. A lot of people use their stuff. They have an MVC framework. They have a CLI tool that lets you spin up new versions of ColdFusion. And as I'm saying that might actually even be easier. You can literally go to Ortus, download Command Box, and just use Command Box to start up a server for yourself. That's another way to do stuff there. If you want to really get into it and really dive in, Adobe offers a certification program it's really good because Nolan built it. And you will be, by the end of that program, you will be a pretty solid CF dev. As like if you do that and pass the cert, like that's pretty much telling me you kind of know enough about CF to be pretty damn dangerous and probably very useful in a production area. So
Maybe we should use
we
that as an opportunity to say that there is a CF certification class happening early October at the ColdFusion Summit in Las Vegas. You can do a whole day workshop that I'll be teaching to like refresh all of the stuff in the certification program. And then at the end of the day, you can actually take the test and see if you get ColdFusion certified or not.
yes,
Plus
and
2 days
that
of other
class.
1 hour sessions about ColdFusion and all kinds of other useful things.
Yeah, it's so there's the conference, which is a blisteringly inexpensive $99, which is like the cheapest conference on earth. I think I pay more for lattes in a month. And then if you want to do, and by the way, that includes all the videos for the cert class. So if you buy that, if you pay $99, you actually get the videos. You don't get the class the next day, and you don't get to take the cert class. You have to add another $100 for that. But again, so cheap, right? And then if you pay $199, which is the professional, you get all the videos, you get the full day class, which I highly recommend. Like it's very intense, but you will learn a ton. And then you get to optionally either take the course that day, which depending on you, you know, how well you take tests, you can either take it there or you can take a proctor test online later. It kind of depends who you are. Like some people love that. Like I just learned, now I'm going to take the test, boom, and then they just want to take it. I've also seen people fold like a house of cards after a insanely intense, stressful day and just blank and fail the test. So you got to know yourself. Sounds like something worth checking out. Well, we could talk all about it as we're dying of heat stroke tomorrow, Lewis. Right before we gorge ourselves on lobster rolls, if we make it. Awesome. Oh, John says, John says, I'm going through the certification videos now, and it's very good. Yes. Yeah, I highly recommend them. They're very awesome. It's well worth the trip. I mean, the conference itself, if anyone has any interest at all in ColdFusion, is so worth it, right? You get to meet so many cool people in the community. Everyone is incredibly friendly and accommodating. You learn from like the best people really in the industry, right? Like the people doing the talks are, you know, lead devs and you know, people who've been doing ColdFusion for a long time. The things they're talking about are, you know, things that they are doing right now, like production workloads that are in some cases, you know, processing hundreds of millions of dollars or like helping a city run, things like that. Like it's pretty darn cool. And then my talk is there too. Um, Thank you, Nolan. Oh, yes. Awesome. Nolan just put um the conference website up. And I should add, there is a party on day one that is going to be lit, y'all. It's gonna be a hell of a thing. We have got the whole pool this year, Nolan. The whole pool.
Whole pool.
The whole Mirage pool is ours. So we are doing our party and the Adobe Learning Manage, you know, like the Adobe Learning Summit.
Mm-hmm.
We're both having the party the same night in the same place. There's 1,000 people. It's going to be an absolute madhouse.
That's a lot of people.
It's going to be a lot of people. Yeah, it's going to be fun. I can't wait. I have a new suit. It's very colorful.
I expect nothing less from you.
Oh, quick FYI. Oh, thank you, Lewis. That's really, how did I miss that? I will let the team know about that. Yep, so
Mark, the website for the conference on the speaker page at the bottom says, and many more to be revealed. There are more speakers. That's a whole bunch of speakers already up there.
There's 30 speakers total.
4, 1, 2, 3.
So 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24.
So one missing.
So maybe not many more.
So more to be revealed.
I'm trying to think.
Hey, more is more.
Who is not here? Nimit, Pete, Ray, me, Monty, Mary Jo, Keen, Gust, George, Gavin, Dave. I love how they put all the Daves together.
I think it's alphabetical by first name.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Dakota, Brian. Oh, wait a minute.
What's up?
Is it because no, you're there.
Oh, I'm there.
You're there, Aaron.
Is Min speaking this year?
No.
Okay.
I know.
Well, we tried.
Yeah, he's going on some sort of like awesome vacation though, apparently.
Oh, right on.
So I can't really.
That's fair.
Can't be mad. Yeah, he's going on some epic trip. But yeah, I actually don't know who's missing.
It's a mystery.
But
well,
yeah, we'll see.
Are there any more questions for Mark before we hit stop on the recording? Going once, going twice. Cool.
Anyone?
All right. I didn't want to. I just figured if we've meandered into just chatting about the conference stuff, we can hit stop in the recording there and continue the conversation if we want. So I'll go ahead and do that.